Hello, LilyPod listeners, and welcome to another episode of LilyPod. We have a special guest today. Alyssa McConkey is a member of our Love and Later Years community, and we found out about her just through a post in the Facebook group. But as we've talked more, we think she has a really fascinating story to tell, and so we wanted to get her on here and give her an opportunity to do that. So Alyssa, can you tell us, first of all, just a little bit about yourself, and then we'll get into your story further on.
Yeah, I'm from Salt Lake, was born here and spent most of my life here, a little bit of time in California growing up, but here, graduated from high school, graduated from the University of Utah in human development and family studies.
So all three of us have that degree.
Yeah. It took me a while to graduate. I went on a mission. It took me 9 years to graduate. I had 2 babies, went on a mission, and then graduated. So
where did you go on your mission?
New Zealand.
Oh, I went to Australia, so
I love it.
We were neighbors, kind of.
Yeah, it was. I had an amazing mission. I went a little bit later at 22. Came home from my mission, and got married pretty quickly because I had dated my previous husband in high school.
Okay.
And college. So we had known each other since I was 15 and had been hanging out. And then I got married soon after.
Did he wait for you? Is that the plan, or did it just work out that way?
It just kind of worked out that way. We both almost married. He was actually engaged to someone different. I almost married someone different who had written me during my mission. But we both ended out ending those relationships, and then, but not with each other's knowledge, kind of not hoping. Anyway, it just kind of worked out that way.
Oh, okay.
I didn't wait for him, and he didn't wait for me. It just worked
and then
out
independently, you both became available.
Yeah.
Okay.
So one less relevant question, but I think people are gonna wonder: are you related to Bruce R. McConkey?
I am, and that may come into the story eventually. But so Bruce is my grandpa's brother, my grandpa's oldest brother.
So like your great uncle, then?
Yeah, he's my great uncle.
Okay. All right. Yeah, I grew up with him as an apostle. So yeah, you can feel free to bring that up as we continue. Did you have more on your introduction?
Well, just a little thing about Bruce that I'll bring up is I didn't know too much about him. I knew he was an apostle, my grandpa's brother. But when I got diagnosed with colorectal cancer, Bruce had that, and that's what he died from.
Oh, that's right.
And that's what his oldest son died from too. So it kind of became more Joseph. Eventually passed from that.
You got more of his genes than you wanted.
Oh yes, I realized that on Ancestry because I connected to both of his daughters, but it didn't say McConkey, and so I was like, who are these women that are like my cousins? And then I found out they were Bruce's daughters, and our DNA is really similar, and thus maybe the cancer. But it
can run in families.
Yeah, and he loves to run, and we just have a lot in common. I realized I was like, oh, he was a runner too. And
was your grandfather Oscar McConkey? Which one was he?
Britt.
Okay.
Yeah, I think he's the third son. I think it goes Bruce. It might go Bruce, Britt, Oscar, or Bruce, Oscar, Britt. And then James is the baby of the family.
I know of Oscar, obviously, because he was a prominent attorney when I was going to law school, really.
So Oscar Sr., is that who, like my great grandpa or Bruce's
I think it would have been your grandpa.
Or my grandpa's brother.
Grandpa's brother is what I meant. Yeah.
Okay. Because my great grandpa was an attorney too, Oscar.
Okay.
So earlier, I don't know if you said your school and if I missed it, but where did you go to college?
University of Utah.
University of Utah. Okay. I went to Utah State and Jeff went to BYU.
Yeah.
We're covering all the bases except for Weaver.
Yeah. And then as far as like career wise, like what have you done since school other than being a mother, which is a huge job?
So I have 3 kids and got pregnant really soon after getting married, had a baby within the first year, had 2 more kids So 3 kids within 5 years. Stayed home with them until my youngest went to preschool, and then I started teaching preschool and took him with me to work.
Do you have boys or girls or?
2 girls and a boy.
Okay.
Okay.
And then, yeah, and I really wanted to teach preschool even before. So it was a perfect, I tried to do other things, and then I always missed my students and just want to go
Yeah.
So
back.
that's still
Those
what
kids
you,
are so cute, like such cute ages.
Yeah. And that's what I still do. I've done it for 16 years.
Awesome.
excellent.
And one last personal question. What do you like to do, like hobby wise?
Hiking.
Okay.
Oh,
I
well,
love
we
hiking.
like that too.
Yeah. So I love hiking. I love being outside. I mean, I was a swimmer in high school, but mostly hiking, some running. I haven't been running as much since I've gone through chemo and stuff like that, but
I imagine.
You've
But
slowed
I-
down as much as you need to.
yeah, but I've handled chemo, yeah, so much better than a lot of people. So I'm really, really grateful.
You don't
Good.
look sick. I mean, really, you don't.
So,
Well, I think you mentioned to me that you are trying to believe right now that you are cancer free, and you're going to find out soon if that's true.
yeah. So
So
I'll
I
get-
believe that you are cancer free also.
yeah. I mean, I will not be bitter either way, but I'm just trying to be hopeful.
Yeah.
Hopefully they're like, we can't see any sign of it, and that I'll find out at the end of the month
Okay.
if they can see the tumor or not, and then that will decide about if I get surgery.
Yeah. So this is in July when we're recording this, but I believe it will come out in August. So
Okay.
by then we'll know.
Yeah.
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 So you'll have to let us know. Yeah, we'll
Yeah.
definitely be praying for you and interested to hear.
Thank you. I appreciate all the prayers. I do feel like it's made a big difference, and I've been pretty public about my cancer diagnosis and on Facebook because I
Yeah.
appreciate all the prayers.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, my best friend has been dealing with the cancer, and she's not very public about it, but it's not a secret, and she's definitely let everyone know that needs to know. And they're going to be coming up on a podcast soon. She got married last year for the first time, which is really exciting.
While
And-
going through chemo.
yeah, and
Wow.
they planned it right between, everything was planned right between her visits, and they're just so happy together. I think it's really helped her to feel that joy in their relationship, and it's, yeah, and she's feeling really hopeful lately as well. So it's a good thing to have a positive mindset when you're trying to heal.
First
Yeah.
marriage for both of them in their 40s. So
Oh, that is exciting.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and our interview with them's coming up in just a few weeks. So
I can't wait to listen.
yeah. So anyway,
yeah,
let's
let's
maybe
launch
move on
in.
to our next question, which is like, just tell us a little bit about your story with your marriage and the relationship as it's progressed through the years. And I believe that you've also had like you had a bit of a faith crisis as part of all of
Yes.
the stuff.
So you can weave that in there too.
yeah, and I know we have a lot of people who can relate to that, and we've even touched on faith crisis in our YouTube video, like in a YouTube video that we recently posted. So yeah, tell us about marriage.
Okay.
Faith.
I believe that you're separated, and yeah.
For a bit, and now I'm divorced.
Okay.
But so we got married soon after I got from my mission. Got married in the temple. He served a mission. I served a mission. I figured it was going to be kind of easy breezy because we did everything the way that we were supposed to. So I thought, okay, we got married in the temple. We went on missions. We were both very dedicated to the church in 100%, 110%. I feel like. I mean, I listened to the BYU devotional every day at 11 o'clock, 5 days a week, to get
Wow.
like my little fill for the day to keep me motivated. And I just started getting more and more depressed the longer that I was married, though. So within 5 years, I was feeling really hopeless. I mean, I thought, I'm going to the temple, I'm reading my scriptures, I'm I'm doing my calling. I was in the primary presidency. I did really love that. And it did make me think, oh, I want to be a preschool teacher. But I think now looking back, I blamed the church for my depression. Whereas now I'm like, oh, it was the marital problems that were making me feel really helpless. And just, I couldn't figure out how to fix.
And were those relationships pretty evident from the get-go, or did you have a honeymoon period?
We didn't really have a honeymoon period because I think we got married when I was 24 and we had known each other since I was 15. It really, like, we really knew each other, but I knew really soon my anxiety was going up and up and up. And then his avoidant behaviors were going up and up and up. And pretty soon we were just not
Kind of in
connecting.
a marriage, but not enjoying one.
Yeah. Like I was always trying to get closer and he was trying to not get closer. It was obvious that there was something wrong. And so I think I mentioned this, I had been obsessed with having a good marriage because my parents had gotten divorced. And I thought, I'm going to major in human development. I'm going to read every single book. I'm going to break this. I'm going to have it all figured out in my head, like think my way through it. Even though I knew all the information, Harville Hendricks, anxious avoidant attachment, and just all the things.
Lots of theories and ideas.
Yeah. And it just, none of it, even though I knew it, I couldn't fix it.
Right. Well, and I mean, even doctors get sick, right? Even with all their schooling. And I think it might be pretty common for people to, like us, who've witnessed relationships that weren't working, to want something better for ourselves. So we go and we get a degree or some equivalent of education for ourselves, and we're going to make it different. And sometimes that works and sometimes it doesn't. And unfortunately for all of us, we experienced more of what we didn't want.
Yeah, it kind of a self.
I think, oh, sorry, go ahead.
Oh no, I mean, I don't know if it's a self-fulfilling prophecy, but I do know that I was focusing on the problems, trying to fix them, and maybe just too much focus on the problems. I really don't know because I never fixed it.
I think that's a real thing. And because I know, and I'm familiar with the law of attraction, and what you put your focus on, you get more of. And what's interesting is it's as simple as reframing what we don't want into what we do want, that can make all the difference in what we attract into our lives. And so that's something I maybe just like to emphasize right here, is that, all the things we don't want can inform our choices. And it can lead us to that reframe that then allows us to attract what we do want. But we do have to do that reframing. That's really important. And that's what we do our work with our coaching, so that, we can help our clients start attracting what they do want, instead of constantly being frustrated that they keep getting what they don't want. Because I think most of us, when we fear something and when we don't want it, we almost can't help but focus on it unless we put intentional effort into shifting that. You wish you would have known that back then.
Yeah. I think
it's never too late. We're still growing and learning, and and sometimes you just kind of have to write all the stuff down you don't want, because you've got that in your head very clear, and then go to that other side of the paper and think, okay, what's the opposite of that? And come up with all the feel good words, all the good, all the good things you do want, then take that other side and get rid of it. Start reframing all of that.
I think you've read Intentional Courtship, but in any event, toward the end of the book, there's an observation that I made about my first marriage, that my first wife, she liked a lot of personal space and alone time, and she wanted to kind of be off by herself a lot, and wasn't as interested in connection. And for me, it was all about connection. And so we had sort of a pursuer distancer dynamic, where, I mean, I was definitely the pursuer. She was the distancer. I guess usually that goes the other way. It's the woman pursuing and the man that's distancing. But in our case, it wasn't. It was the way I just described. And I don't fault her for wanting those things or being that way. But I guess the larger point is, even though I was a family science major too, and I was trying to use all that knowledge and education to figure out, our marriage and what had gone wrong with it and all of that. I think when I was married at 26, that question about, gosh, how we would spend our evenings together, or do you want more connection or more distance or whatever, that was a question I didn't even know to ask. It was one of those things that can come up in marriage. And I mean, even with all the education that I had in that, it didn't, there was a certain level of life experience I just lacked in being able to even assess whether that was going to be a potential issue.
And I think we can fall into that pattern of being a pursuer, distancer, but whoever our partner is, we act different. So in high school, when I dated, the guys that I dated were always the pursuers, and I was always distancing, and then I got married, and then I became, I thought we're married. I became the pursuer because I'm like, okay, we're married now. We can be, physically close and emotionally close. So I'm all in. And then I was not used to that because I had not played that part before.
Right. And
Sucks,
then you're
doesn't
playing
it?
it with someone who isn't playing back. And that's hard.
Yeah, it was very, I was just like, wait, and I looked at my little sisters and they were having such a different experience. And I was like, wait, we're all kind of similar, but who you marry and who you're interacting with, we do play on each other.
Right. So, kind of moving into the faith crisis part, when did that start? Because I mean, you were so devout, so active.
I was so devout, and I was becoming so unhappy. And I thought, okay, well, it must be our life plan. Like, it must be the church. If you do everything the church says, you could still be miserable. So maybe this is just wrong, because I'm not happy. I couldn't pray anymore than I was praying or be any more active. So my solution was, okay, let's not be members and let's just focus on our relationship and be authentic and try our own path, not the path that the church gave us.
Was that kind of your next thing to try? Is that the idea?
I mean, I went to therapy and I told my therapist that idea, and she said, yeah, I don't think that's going to work. And I was like, well, I have to do something because I cannot lose my marriage.
Yeah.
I was more scared of losing my marriage than I was of losing being a member of the church. I was holding so tight to it that this has to work.
Because it was the most important thing that you'd ever
done.
Been thinking about your whole life, wanting that more than anything.
Making it work with the kids, and we were a family, and this is just what families do. And so this will fix everything. We'll focus on each other and our interests. And so I left. I had been gone for maybe 10 years from the church, and it wasn't getting so much better. So I figured if he joined me on that route, it would get better. And for a little bit it did, and then it just started to get worse.
Did he join you in
being inactive?
Yeah.
Yep. He was like, okay, okay. I mean, I kind of pulled him kicking and screaming, but he finally was like, okay, we'll give this a try. And for a little bit it was good, and then it just started to get worse and worse. Like, I was like, oh, this is even worse than before, like it just was bad. And so I could see then that I was like, and I even brought up, let's go back to church. This experiment failed. I was like, this failed. It's worse. Our relationship's even worse than it was before. Let's go back. And then at that point he was like, oh, I'm never going back.
Oh,
I'm never going back, and I don't want to do counseling, and I'm done. He was just.
And at that
so he
point,
wanted the divorce at that point.
He didn't. At that point, he was just good. He is like maybe your previous wife, who was just kind of good on his own. He didn't really want to have an engaged marriage, but he didn't want to go to counseling, but he didn't want to get divorced at that point. He just
So
said,
you
"We'll
were
just
stuck with the choice. Can I live with this?
oh yeah." And my therapist told me, if you stay like this, you are going to be the loneliest person. I do not see you being happy if you stay, and you will just be so lonely.
Yeah.
And I stayed for quite a while, and eventually I wasn't suicidal, but I didn't really want to live anymore, especially after the pandemic. We're isolating together. I'm feeling not connected to him. And I just was so unhappy. And my sister's like, come live with me. I think she really worried for my life. Just come live with me. Let's see. My youngest went off to college. I moved in with my little sister. And I did start to do a little bit better, but the idea of getting divorced also put me into a tailspin. Like I started having panic attacks, which I had never had.
Well, it doesn't help that you were also experiencing a worldwide pandemic at the same
Yeah,
time.
yeah. I was just like, oh, it was all, yeah. I mean, the idea of getting divorced, I really related to Jeff when he would talk about that in his podcast. I just thought, this is my life's work. This is everything I've dedicated myself to for 23 years. And even before that, because I had prepared to get married, reading all the books and just being so excited, and just to have it fail in my mind was just, I couldn't deal with it. So I tried medication that did not.
It was your biggest fear, and it
was
was
my
happening.
biggest fear, and it was happening. And medication didn't help. And this is where I have to say, I knew I had to sign the divorce papers, and that's when I decided to find out my membership number and contact my bishop, get a patron.
At this point, how long had you not been? About 10 years, you said?
Oh, at this point, almost 20 years since I had gone to church.
Okay.
I had gone for like a blessing here and there, but it was almost 20 years. But
So were your kids not members either?
My youngest is not. My older two were baptized, but my youngest had never, because even at that point, his dad had left too, because
Right.
and I still hold so much guilt. It's still playing really hard for me that I'm like, why was that my idea? It was so terrible.
Well, you were trying something different. Well, and
Yep.
I think you said you had some negative interactions about the church in your relationship, right?
Yeah.
And that was part of it.
I definitely thought that I saw there was a lot of kind of inequality that I started to think was the church's fault.
It was patriarchy kind of
Patriarchy.
thing.
Yeah. And I thought, okay, well, when that's removed from our lives, then my marriage, I'm going to be treated like an equal, and my views will be seen as just as important as his views.
Hmm.
And no, I was like, oh, the church. It's been really eye-opening to me that I think there was a show that just came out, Under the Banner of Heaven. I think that's what it is. And people were like, oh, the church makes men act in these ways. And after what I experienced, I was like, oh, the church was the best thing that ever happened for my previous husband. Without it, it
made it worse.
It made it way worse. I mean, so we can blame religion, but I think often they just are using religion in a way that's not healthy.
Right. It was more of a psychological problem, and religion was just
a tool.
Yeah.
So did you get the deep hollow ache?
You mean with getting divorced?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I still just struggle that I always thought, I'm the oldest of 5. And I think I always thought I can fix anything.
We're all the oldest children, by the way. I'm the oldest of 3. Jeff's the oldest of how many?
6.
So
yeah, and I had the same thing. I thought, oh, I can fix whatever
Yeah.
comes up. I'm smart enough and blah, blah,
confident
blah.
and capable. I was like, oh no, because especially we are both competent, good people. Like I knew, I was just like, well, this has to work. We cannot give up. And even still, I get where I'm like, no, this isn't right. we have to fix this. And that's where I have to like step back, because it's a very like codependent, controlling, like, I will force us to fix this, and you can't force
No.
people to do what they don't want to do. So you have
Right.
to just let
You
go.
can't talk them into it, no matter how smart you are.
And I've tried.
Me too.
You know, like, nope, this is eternity. These are our children. I know that this is meant to be, and there is no, I'm like, and that is where I'm like, you have to let people live their own lives.
Right.
And honor agency.
And honor agency. And when we
Right.
try to take that over, we become in more like Satan's tool, because then they hate
Right.
that. You know?
Codependent, and
Mhm.
we create lots of drama instead of helping solve it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So did you feel that rejection in your body somewhere, like in your chest or in your stomach, or like, did you have that sort of physical pain with the divorce?
I don't think I mean, I think I felt it in my depression. So 5 years into being married, I think I just really started to feel like I was less than. And I thought, oh, it's the church put me in that position, that women are less than. And I was depressed, and I just wasn't, but I didn't have any like aches and pains, but I did have really low self-esteem.
Yeah.
I just really low, terrified, just thought,
So you struggled with the confidence.
yes, my
Yeah.
confidence was like just so low. I had felt so dismissed for so long.
Well, and if before you had the feeling that I'm all powerful and I can fix anything and I can make this work because I'm smart and good personality, and dang it, people like
And
me.
I've got a degree. I've got a degree.
Yeah,
in
I
this
have a
stuff.
degree in family studies. I can make it work.
Yeah.
I mean,
It was,
we have a good friend who's a PhD in psychology and a therapist, and he's been divorced a couple of times.
yeah, like
So, I mean,
it,
nobody's immune.
yeah, no, but it was really good for me to live with my sister. I do feel like this was meant to be, to go into her home, see how she and her husband interacted, because I had told my kids, never get married. This is a nightmare. I don't know. But after I saw her and lived there and thought, no, her husband and she treat each other like equals. It was really helped me to see marriage as being a good thing again, and to see the church in action, because they were good members. They were trying their best. And it really just had an influence on me to be like,
Yeah.
okay, I want what they have. Maybe I can keep trying.
Yeah. And I think you had mentioned to us that was part of your transition back towards your faith, was seeing that, oh, relationships can be good within the faith. It was just the dynamic that was my problem.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, my sister is really confident, and her husband treats her like an equal, and she is an equal. And that's, now that I look around, I went back to church and just saw more people, and I thought just our dynamics weren't working.
Mm-hmm.
But it had nothing to do with it being Mormon or anything like that.
Something I learned in going to Rick's college back in the day, right before it became BYU Idaho, is when I was there. And I remember thinking back then that nobody in the same religion really sees it the same. Like, everyone has their own take on it, their own viewpoint. And so when I started dating intentionally, before I ended up with Jeff, I just remember thinking, I really need to observe, how does this person do religion? And is it compatible with the way I do it? We're not necessarily going to see everything exactly the same, but do we have a general idea in the same direction of how we want to do this?
Yeah, that makes total sense. And I can see that. One thing I was going to say too, when I lived with my sister, I got addicted to listening to your podcast. So I heard one, and then every week I would be really excited. And I was like, okay, they have lived through this. They have, learned lessons and moved on and kept moving forward, and didn't just give up on life and give up on marriage and give up on everything. It was really inspiring for me. So thank you.
Thank you. I think that's how we became familiar with you, as you mentioned that it had made a big difference in your faith and your viewpoint of religion. And I think you even said you got a temple recommend.
Yeah, I mean, just I think listening, it was a whole culmination of things.
Sure.
But definitely I was really excited just to be like, with my sister's influence, my bishop's influence, and your influence. And yeah, I just was like, okay, I'm going back in.
And you know what, I've been meaning to tell you, and I've been wanting to tell you face to face like this, that just really touched us, you know.
Yeah,
I mean,
it did.
because we do all this stuff and we don't know how we're impacting people, and for you to share that with us, so it would just really made our day, of course, that day. And then, you know, we've been pondering it ever since, and we're like, wow, we're making a difference, and maybe we won't always know, but we really appreciate that you shared that with us. And you said you've listened to every podcast.
I've listened to every podcast. I've listened to some, you know, like I think I've listened to the divorce decision like 3 times, because I'll start to think, did I do everything? Did I do everything to save this? And I'll have to listen to it over and over and over and be like, yeah, I did all those things.
You did all those things. In fact, when you were talking about it, I'm like, she did the divorce decision. Like, she came to all those conclusions. She figured out he didn't want to get any help. Nothing was going to change. And you knew you couldn't live with that.
I know I couldn't live with that. And that it would eventually maybe even have taken me where I would want to take my own life. I was like, I have to.
Yeah, when you can feel your soul crushing, and if you stay, it's eating away at you like day after day, and it just gets worse and worse. It's at some point you're just like, I gotta self-preserve now.
Yeah,
because otherwise there's nothing left of me.
Yeah, I'm like, you have to put your life jacket on and just be like, okay, maybe I have to go in my own direction and just rebuild. And
yeah, it doesn't make it easy, but it makes it necessary.
You know, it's funny. I've got a pretty good friend that I've known since college. She was one of my former wife's roommates, and she and several other people that at least appeared happily married, when we were going through our situation, they suggested, well, why don't you guys create basically a marriage in name only, because you got to keep your family together for the kids. So why don't you live with separate bedrooms and separate lives, but you get together once in a while for a family dinner, or, you know, basically you live in the same house, but you're not really married. You're divorced under the same roof. And I pondered that because I thought, you know, I would make almost any sacrifice for my kids. But when I pondered that idea, the thought for me was, gosh, if I do this for 5 more years, there'll be nothing left of me. And literally it was like, it's already soul destroying to live this way. You know, I know when people are in enough pain, they'll do almost anything for a little relief. And I thought, yeah, I'm going to be vulnerable to affairs. I'm going to be, you know, I mean, there were all kinds of scenarios I could see where if I don't find a way to shift this, then this is not going to end well for me. Yeah. And likewise for my kids. So I'm not suggesting that the first hint of trouble, people run out and get divorced, because that is hard on kids. And I think the hardest, you know, the most painful thing that my kids have ever experienced is still my divorce from their mother. But I think a lot of times people that haven't been there, don't really understand the deep pain that you feel that drives this decision. And interestingly, the one person I mentioned before who one time kind of lectured me on, you've got to slam the door on divorce. Don't even consider it. You're living under the same roof. Well, she ended up getting divorced herself. And she found out how painful and difficult and, you know, the kind of thing that causes people to take that dramatic of a step, particularly people of our faith.
Well, and yeah, I think you leave yourself open to suicide, affairs, because you're so lonely that you're like, maybe I shouldn't be alive. I can end this loneliness. I can just not be alive. Or, you know, people might have affairs or do different things. And I also think when you were talking about that, of the temple and just of Heavenly Father's plan, I don't think the plan was just for no matter what, we live in the same family, we keep our family together, but we're not really married. I mean, it's just on paper.
It's a sham.
And I don't think that's what Heavenly Father, we can't grow from each other if we're not even interacting.
Right. Well, and I think the way that we help each other to grow the most is by being kind and aware when we're triggering each other and being sensitive to that and allowing those triggers to come up and to be healed and released, rather than pouring more salt on those wounds that we all carry from childhood and various experiences. During during a Facebook Live we did recently, I mentioned that Jeff and I, between the two of us, had gone through 4 marriages and 4 divorces before finding each other, and in order to prepare us for the marriage we have now. And I thought, that almost sounds like I'm proud of it. I'm not proud of it. Those were hard experiences, and we wouldn't wish them on our worst enemy, but we're not ashamed of them. Like we've affirmatively decided to not be ashamed of them, because what is the purpose of that? What good does that do? That doesn't add goodness to our lives, but to recognize that they were part of our path and that they made us better people because of what we've, like the hard work we've done on our own minds and our own hearts and figuring out how to show up in our relationship better. It really can be a gift. It's just really hard.
It made me think of that. My divorce was so hard on me that finding out that I had cancer, it didn't even seem like a
big deal
of the hard. That's how hard my divorce was for me.
Yeah, my sister died around the time I started kind of separating and trying to figure out if my marriage could work. And it actually did go another 3 or 4 years after that. But at the time, we were on the brink of divorce, and then we eventually did. But when she died, I was like, and some people who've experienced death of a loved one but not divorce do not understand how we could say this, but Jeff felt the same way about the death of his little brother. It's like, yes,
it was very hard
and it was sad, but nothing compared to the severing of an intimate partnership. That is just really rough.
Yeah. And I 100% agree. On the gift side that I was trying to go towards is, because I had done the divorce, it was so hard for me. I feel like I was more prepared. So I had signed my divorce papers, and a few months later, I was diagnosed with cancer.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like the work that I did to get healthy and spiritual from my divorce, that also put me in a place that I was so much better to deal with.
Yeah. So you're almost like, cancer, I can handle this. I really did. I mean, I feel like of course I didn't want to hear that because I didn't have any symptoms. Oh, here's another little plug for getting a colonoscopy, because I didn't have any symptoms. And I didn't, I just went getting my regular preventative. I go in. So it was very shocking. And I was almost didn't believe it. I almost had to see the papers, and I was like, no, this is not me. I'm really healthy. This can't be happening to me. But it had really prepared me to face what I had to face. Because cancer still, chemo is hard, radiation is hard, surgeries, and some people don't make it. It is not an easy thing. But I think all of these things can be a gift if we turn the perspective to make it a gift. Oh yeah.
We can grow.
Well, and I don't know if you have done this or felt this, but I know at one point I felt very strongly. I believe it was in the temple that I got this revelation that both of my marriages and subsequent divorces were part of my life path. And I knew it, I knew it deep in my heart. And so anytime I felt tempted to regret a decision or think maybe I should have done something different, well, there's no should haves if it's part of my path.
Right.
And I think God needed me to know that, because it was very clear. Have you felt any of that?
I had more with my cancer diagnosis, that I was never angry or bitter or like, why is this happening to me? And I feel like my sister thought, she made a comment, she's like, it was like you were juggling with the divorce and then you got thrown a watermelon, like with cancer, like how was this even? But with that, I very much felt like I had probably chosen to have this in the pre-existence. Like,
yeah, I felt like I lost everything that Job lost except my health. And of course, you lost that too in the middle of everything. But the good news, of course, is that God gave Job twice as much as he had before. And of course, I believe he's going to give you twice as much as you had before. Yeah. I want to ask you, though, I just know in my own experience, I had the words of President McKay ringing in my head: no other success can compensate for failure in the home. Oof. And so getting divorced, I kind of felt like, okay, that test we've got the results, the results are in, and I'm a failure. I get an F.
And I'm sure there's so many people who feel that way.
Did you have that kind of, I mean, whether it was through that specific statement or not, did you have that kind of Latter-day Saint guilt over?
Oh, and I still do.
At the thing that was most important.
Still do? Okay.
I mean, I still think, how did I not make this work? But something that does really motivate me, that my bishop said when he was about to give me a blessing, about my kids, and I worry about my kids. How could I want to pass on better things to my children? And he was like, it's the long game. And so I've tried to focus on that I can be an example to my kids now as they watch, since I have cancer and I've been through divorce. How am I handling it? How it's the long game. How do they see me? And so I can show them.
This stew takes a long time to cook. That's how I say it.
Yes, the stew takes a long time to cook, and they will face hard things. And I can just keep choosing to be obedient and faithful and trust in the Lord, rely on my Savior, have a good attitude, try my best, repent and move on and let those things go, because that's why we're here. I mean, we're all going to make mistakes, and I just need to show them, keep on going, just, repent, make better choices, learn, grow.
Yeah. I love that you mentioned letting go, because there are so many things that we find in the divorce process that don't serve us. The guilt, the I've failed feeling, because if we're in the long game, that's not going to serve our long game. But recognizing it's part of our path, which is what we are encouraging people to believe, because I guess, how do we know it's part of our path? Is because it is. Exactly. So might as well accept it and move forward from that, and let go of all the thoughts that, really just kind of keep us stuck.
Yeah. And why say stuck? I mean, it's just not. I have wondered if my cancer is connected with not letting go. Mm-hmm. I feel like I held on. I mean, I was, again, married 25 years, that I maybe held on too long. But I still struggle, even though I said that was too long, I still struggle with being just like, it's done and move on.
Tell us how through the blessing you got, it gave you the courage and the power to sign those divorce papers. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, I just felt like I didn't want to, and that couldn't have been God's plan for me to sign these 4 papers. I was like, nope, I can't do it. And in the blessing, he's like, let go, forgive, there's things in store for you. Just be kind and loving, forgive, move on. And just that advice to just forgive and let go and move on, I still think is the best advice, because if I start getting upset about the way our marriage worked out, then I'm just not productive. It's not productive.
Right. Right. And we can get really tempted to ruminate on all of that stuff and just lose our peace to it.
Yeah.
Can you picture You know, now or before, or before you go to bed at night or whenever, can you, sort of close your eyes and picture God sitting up on his heavenly throne saying, look, kid, be patient. I have something much better for you. Stick with me.
Mhm. I do think that is stick with me. And that keeps coming through my head, okay, he is with us. If we put him first, it will work out. And I even believe it will work out as we pass away. We might not live forever, but as we will have the strength and the peace, whatever hard things come, if we stay close to him, we will be able to handle it and be okay if we trust in him. When we put our trust in him and we're just patient, it just gives me so much peace that I had been fighting when I thought, no, I know my family's going to be like this. It's going to look like this. And that, but we just have to trust.
Yeah. I mean, I relate to that a great deal. And in my experience, all of the things that I thought were tragedies turned out to be tender mercies. I mean, it was very difficult, and I didn't have that perspective at the time I went through those things. 5 years of almost homeless level poverty, where I struggled to try to get some traction and get back into the game of life and couldn't seem to. And
that happened with my health for about the same amount of time.
Loss of a marriage, which even though it was very broken, I valued it highly. And, yet when I think about it, if I hadn't gone through all that, I wouldn't have Cathy. I wouldn't have the amazing career I have now. We wouldn't have Love in Later Years, obviously. And I wouldn't have 2 more sons to add to the 2 I had. So literally, in almost every way, God has given me twice as much as I had before. And I think it's hard, though, when you're in the middle of the trial to really understand that, well, like what Paul promised us, all things work together for good to them that love God and are called according to his purpose.
Well, and we're being shaped through these experiences. And for me, illness has helped me know how to slow down and the importance of it. And that I don't get to control everything, and that I don't get to push my body to the breaking point and not have it break. And I also have had to let go like you. And I think even some of my stuff, it hasn't been cancer, but it's been autoimmune and digestive and energy, like crashes, like extreme fatigue. I mean, like where I could hardly walk, extreme. And I just remember all of that, helping me learn that I can't just give until I'm on empty. And also, I've got to learn to let go of what I can't control and allow, and getting mad at it doesn't help. Like getting mad at cancer doesn't cure it. You got to just accept what comes and go through the motions. And I really think we're shaped through every experience, including divorce, including relationships that are hard. I think, and it's been kind of rolling through my head that the only reason we ever make a sacrifice, the only sacrifices that have ever been made, has been to make room for something better. Always. Mm-hmm. So this letting go thing isn't just saying I'm losing something. It's saying I'm going to make space.
Mm-hmm. I'm going to trust in God.
Yeah. And I'm trusting he's making space in my life for something better with these closed doors.
Yeah. I mean, even losing my brother, I think, there were probably times in my life when he was an influence and I didn't see it. And I know that for him, passing to the other side, he had no fear of death. He saw it as an act of consecration. So I think even with that, I mean, I didn't want it. It was very hard to lose him, but it also made space for some really important things. So I was going to ask you, I mean, sounds like a ludicrous question, but do you intend to give up on your kids? You know,
It is a ludicrous
and
question.
you mentioned that they're not in the church, and, do you intend to give up on them?
No, I mean, I love them like I always have loved them. I've been really lucky with my family because I know I talk to people who haven't had my experience. When I decided I went from like in the primary presidency, going to the temple, to just nothing. Like then I didn't go, I took my garments off. I was just like, I'm done. And my family was so great about it. I mean, not that they were like, yay. I mean, they were sad, but they just said, we love you. My grandparents on both sides, we love you just the same. We love you. We love you. We love you. And so that I feel like I've had a great experience.
That is so good.
They were so kind and great.
Good.
But
I feel like I want to be the same to my kids. I'm like, I love them. And
the point of my ludicrous question
what is the point, Jeff?
Well, Jesus said, that if we, being evil, know how to give good gifts to our children, how much more is God willing to give good gifts to us? And so I think anytime you feel like I've failed, I've made so many mistakes, is God finished working with you? Well, if you're going to persevere with your kids, he's certainly going to persevere with you. And I also believe that redemption has a lot to do with restoring things that were lost. It doesn't mean, like Cathy said, it doesn't mean that those things are within our control. I mean, I've got a son that's a daredevil, and Cathy could tell you, we were hiking with him last summer. He just hopped off this cliff onto a cliff below several feet, where one false slip would have meant death. Okay, that kind of stuff drives me nuts about him.
Oh yeah.
But I can't do anything about it. I can give him my opinion nicely, but he's going to do what he's going to do.
Mm-hmm.
And so I can't make him, I just pray that he'll live long enough to wise up.
Yeah.
And
he probably will. I mean, that one thing, if you would have known me 10 years ago or 15 years ago, no one, including myself, would ever think that I would go back to the Mormon church and be active LDS. I would have bet $1 million against that ever happening. So if it can, so part of me is like, if it happened to me, we never know what life holds for our kids and what it's going to take. And a lot of times tragedies, I hate that there are tragedies, but my daughter had a tumor in her spinal cord, actually within this last 2 years.
Mm-hmm.
And when she came out of surgery, I could see a huge change in her towards spirituality, that she had made some gains. She was having panic attacks. She had a lot of pain in her nerves. Anyway, I could see that when I talked to her about trusting in God, that was the only thing that we got to help calm her down. And so things can happen, or, tumors or tragedies, and we never know what good is going to come from that.
Yeah. I mean, and I take the position, I've got a son that also isn't involved in the church and hasn't been since his teen years. He's in his mid-20s now. But I just take the position that ultimately he's coming back.
Mm-hmm.
And how is that going to happen and when? Couldn't tell you. I don't know.
But you love him the same either way.
But I love him the same. I don't love him less because he doesn't go to church and because he's had some other, issues that I wouldn't have wanted for him. But yeah, I try to not become codependent about it by saying, God knows how to do his work better than I do.
Mm.
And God knows the end from the beginning. And have you heard the Orson F. Whitney quote where he says, Joseph Smith taught, and he never taught a more comforting doctrine. And he talks about kids who stray. And he said that the temple covenants of their parents will ultimately draw them back to the faith and to their family and all the rest of it. And I just put my faith in that and say, well, God knows what to do. If he wants to use me to help, he'll make it clear how I should be involved in that. But I think right now, the fundamental thing that I need to do is just let him know I love him regardless.
That I feel like is one of my biggest struggles, even with my marriage, of trying to be controlling, maybe because I'm an oldest. I will orchestrate this. I will make it work out. And I have to realize with my kids, that's going to backfire.
Right.
To try to force it. I was like, that is a struggle. I feel like I really need to be like, I love you. I love you. Period.
And I'm in the long game is
Oh,
what you need to keep, you keep
yep,
telling
that
yourself.
Bishop Lunt. I'm like, that was a great quote.
Yeah, that's awesome. And you know, I don't think I've necessarily shared this because I don't think it's been pertinent, but I feel like I maybe could share it right now, is that for a few years I didn't go to church, and I never removed my names from the records or anything, but I was pretty bitter about the way I witnessed religious interaction growing up. And I needed to unlearn, because I was like, if I'm feeling all these negative feelings of shame inside me, this is not working, you know. And that was more of a psychological issue than a religious issue, but I needed to figure out how to separate that for myself. And I don't know if you've experienced this coming back, but it seems like when you do a purposeful unlearning of what you didn't like about how you practiced religion or how you interacted with others or what you witnessed, it seems like you come back in with a stronger spiritual foundation, and the religion then is there to support your spirit.
I do feel like I've come back even stronger than before. And I was pretty diehard before too, but I was actually very much black and white. And now that I've left for almost 20 years and I'm back, I can see things, and I am more compassionate to why people might leave. You know, I'm like, oh, my situation played a part in it, and we don't know what's going on for everyone else. So we just
not
don't
a
need
tenth
to
of
judge.
it. Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm much less black and white, much less judgmental.
Yeah.
Much more compassionate.
Yeah, that's how I feel too.
You know, yeah, I think you found our podcast because we interviewed Jennifer Finlayson Fife at one point. And one thing she said during that podcast, and I've heard her say it otherwise too, is that to some degree or another, we're all worshiping a false god, because our finite mind can't comprehend the infinite, can't comprehend the eternal completely. And so we're kind of fitting God into the image we have of a God, and instead of what he really is. And hopefully over life, we can get closer to understanding, but we all have our own conception. And I think that comes back to something we were talking about earlier, that, you know, we're trying to come to a better understanding of God, but you know, we have to also understand and accept that in mortality, it's always going to be, to some extent, an elusive pursuit.
I agree.
And I think that it takes some spiritual maturity to see that, and to understand that there's, like you said, there's a whole lot of gray area. One of the best pieces of advice I've ever gotten, I went to our Relief Society president, an award I was in years ago. And she was also a counselor, and I asked her about this home teaching family I was working with. And she told me a bunch of stuff, but the thing I really remember was, keep listening and don't say anything, don't give any advice until you feel compassion. And she said, when you feel compassion, then you're beginning to understand where they're coming from. And,
Oh, I
and
love
I've
that.
found that to be really good advice. It's like you said, we don't really know what's going on with people, why they might have chosen to leave the church. We just, we're not in their heads and we don't understand.
Yeah.
It's something I'm definitely learning more about. This quote, I was going to read this quote from Rumi that I keep thinking about. If I can find it. But I used to think I could give advice and change the world, and if I just got one on the right page. And this quote keeps going through my mind. It's, yesterday I was clever, so I wanted to change the world. Today I'm wise, so I am changing myself. By Rumi. And that's really made me think, being more compassionate, changing myself, I will understand more. I don't even have to worry about changing other people. Just worry about.
Well, and it's through changing ourselves and showing up as our highest and best self with the highest energy vibration possible every day is how we change the world.
Mm-hmm. Through example. And it doesn't have to be, and just through the words that we say without like saying, do this, do this, do this, which.
Well, and the happier you are living the gospel, the more your children and those around you will see that there's some benefit in it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And when you do so with compassion, that's even added bonus because then they also feel like you understand.
Mm-hmm. My dad is a great example. He is divorced, but he lives the gospel as best he can. And he is very happy. And it definitely has given me more hope that he's remarried. And I'm just like, okay, it's been a good example. He doesn't have to preach it to me. I can just see it.
That's good. I'm so glad you've been loved through all of your hardships and all your choices and journey and through your journey.
So much love. And cancer that helped me to get so much more love in my life that I would have never expected. Just people coming out of the woodwork and strangers who became friends. It's been a gift. It sounds weird to say that getting cancer or having cancer can be a gift, but I've been shown so much love.
Oh, that's so good.
Well, let me ask you something about this journey. You said earlier, I think, that you would have bet $1 million against your ever returning to the church, which is, a pretty strong statement. So what was that moment or that salient influence where you just said, okay, I'm going to go back on all of the big words I've said in the past and all of my resolve to never be in the church again? What was it that ultimately, dawned on you that, oh, maybe
I was praying. I've always prayed, so I've never given up on God. And I've pretty much been Christian too. I never was like Jesus always, but Mormonism definitely was out. But I was praying and praying and praying about what to do with my life. I felt I should take yoga teacher training. So I signed up through the U, and one of the assigned readings was to read the Gita.
I've read it too.
It's really good. And when I was reading it, all of a sudden, it's about service and love of God and service mostly. And all of a sudden, I just felt, I'm reading the Gita and I just feel the spirit come over me to be like, this is true, but my path is through my faith of origin, where I came from. That's my path. But I knew what the Gita was saying was true, that service and love of God and serving your fellow men is true. But I knew for me, I should come back. I mean, it sounds weird to be like yoga and the Gita led me back to Mormonism, but it really did. I mean, then I was just like, I need to get my blessing. This is going to be my healing. It's going to be through my faith. I can't say for everyone else what theirs is, but I knew that was, and I had been softened in a lot of other ways. I think living with my sister, just so many kind people, looking at the people around me that were happy. They were living the gospel.
Yeah. I'm so grateful that you shared your story, because it's an amazing story, and that you were willing to serve in this capacity as our guest.
Yes, because it's terrifying to me. This is not I do not like doing things like that.
If you hadn't have told us that before, I wouldn't have thought that at all through the interview. You've been very confident and you've been very articulate, and you've shared a lot of really great wisdom and thoughts as you've, shared your journey. So thank you. And I actually have one last question. Do you have one last question?
I have one last question after
me. Okay. I would just love for you to share what, since you've listened to every single podcast we've done, and I think so far we've done 77, maybe when this comes out, it'll probably be 80 something. Anyway, what are your favorites?
Okay, I made a list. The divorce decision is not, it's not necessarily my favorite, but it did keep helping me to remind myself to not feel bad, because I would just say, no, I've done, so I can fix this. There's something that I've missed. And that just helped me to be like, nope, I did all the things. But some of my favorites, The Power of Letting Go, Illusion of Control, I think that's 38. Number 41, Hurry and Wait. And 43, Rising Like a Phoenix. And I don't know what numbers, but I love one about the Serenity Prayer. That's been a big part of my life for many years. I have felt that ring true to me. I really think Bill W., who created Alcoholics Anonymous, I do think he's inspired. I mean, the Serenity Prayer and the 12-step program, I think, is an amazing, inspired program. And there was another one that I loved. Well, I think the Lord's Prayer, that I just always feel the spirit with the Lord's Prayer too. And I think you did an episode on that too.
We did.
That I love. So all these things, I was just like, oh, I love it. Yes, this has helped me.
Yeah. Thank you so much for sharing your favorites. Maybe our listeners will go check those out if they haven't heard them yet.
So before I ask the last question, I want to first thank you for coming on. I know you were kind of nervous about it.
Very nervous.
But I think this is part of letting your light so shine, putting your light on a candlestick instead of under a bushel, so that people can see God working in your life and glorify him. And I think we've heard a lot of affirmations of faith, despite the difficulties that you've gone through, whether it's divorce or cancer or any of those, the faith crisis. All of it, I think we've heard a lot of affirmations of faith from you. And the last question I want to ask you is simply, is there anything else that you wanted to say or felt inspired to say, or, we'll give you the last word on anything you want to talk about that we haven't covered yet?
Maybe just tell other people to share their stories. I was really hesitant. I really did not want to share my story personally, but I have felt that God wants me to share my story. And your stories helped me so much that has made me think, well, sharing my story might help someone else. And I should do that because you did that for me. So maybe I can do that for someone else. And maybe someone listening to this can share their story with someone who needs it, because we just don't know where people are in their lives. And I think our stories are so important. And no matter if you don't want to share it because you're scared or you feel stupid or just, I don't know, but we're supposed to help each other through this life.
Oh, I love that. Thank you so much.
Alyssa McConkey has been our guest. Want to tell you we love you. We're glad you're a part of our Love in Later Years community. And thank you again for showing up and talking about your story. And we want to tell our audience to remember, share your story, because any time is a great time for more love in your life. Thanks for listening.
And for watching.
Thanks.